Hey everybody, welcome to the Orange and Brown Talk podcast. Dan Labbe with Mary Kay Cabot and Ashley Bastock here on a Wednesday, recording this about 5:45. Of course, today was Shedeur Sanders Day. He had his weekly press conference, and we are going to start with Shedeur Sanders. It is the topic of the rest of the season. We've said it over and over again. This is all about Shedeur Sanders and seeing what he can do, the case he can make to potentially at least be in the mix as a starting quarterback next season. And it's his show right now, Mary Kay. And I'm just wondering, you just put up a story on Shedeur and what he had to say today. What was your big takeaway from Shedeur's Wednesday presser?
Well, there were a number of things in there. There were some nuggets, and two of the things that I wrote about and that I put in my headline were the fact that he was saying, this is the foundation. This is the worst year for me that it's going to be, and that he believes that he's just laying the foundation and that he's going to build on everything that he's doing now, and that what you're seeing in the moment right now this season is not really necessarily who he is. So that's one thing. And then the other thing was that he had a conversation and got some advice from Jameis Winston recently. And we didn't even know, we've never even heard him talk about Jameis Winston before. And so I thought that was kind of interesting that he, that he got this advice from Jameis and what Jameis told him. And then the third thing that really stands out, and I put this in the story, but I couldn't jam everything into the headline. But the other thing that really stands out is he just continues to talk about how he is still really trying to get on the same page with his receivers, particularly Jerry Jeudy. They're really not there yet. And I think they both know it. It's a work in progress. And he just talked a lot about how, he can hit those explosives. He can hit the deep ball. But you have to really be all on the same page if you're going to hit those intermediate routes and the check downs and the shorter things. So those are some of the things I think that he's working on heading into this game.
So, Ashley, you used a word yesterday on our podcast. It was a big word, and you said dichotomy. We were talking about Myles Garrett and the sack record in this 3-win season and how weird it kind of is. And I feel like with Shedeur Sanders, there's sort of this dichotomy between this idea of, here's your chance to win this I don't want to say win this job, but here's your chance to make your case for this job. But also, I still feel like you've got to be really patient with him, because we're talking about a 5th round pick. We're talking about a rookie. We're talking about a guy who had a ton of bad habits to break. And if he's ever going to develop into a viable starter in this league, I think it's going to take time, and you have to have patience. But we also know that once this season is over, I don't know how much patience the Browns can have, because they might have the number 2 pick in the draft or the number 3 pick in the draft. And if you take a guy that high, he's your guy. So it is sort of a weird, this is me, the English major, stealing a word from you. It is a weird dichotomy. I hope I'm using that right, in fact. But it's just sort of strange that they've got to be patient, but I don't know if they can be.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I wrote this column today because I was thinking about it after I made that comment on our pod yesterday. This idea that the division is wide open. The AFC in general is pretty wide open. Only one team so far has clinched technically a playoff spot, the Denver Broncos, heading into this week. The Steelers are now, after Monday night, they're atop the division with 8 wins. So like Wyatt Teller said today, they're in a spot where 7 wins, you're in the fight, right? 10 wins, you would for sure win the whole division and be in the postseason. So to that point, windows in the NFL can be so narrow, right? Some teams, they're very long. I mean, the Chiefs are out of the postseason for the first time in 10 years. That's what kind of spawned this discussion. And then I remember we had this discussion 4 years ago. What if the Bills window was 13 seconds in a 2021 divisional game before Patrick Mahomes and Kansas City marched down the field and tied the game and then won in overtime? You just don't know. So to look back at this year and think, as Mary Kay likes to say, they had a Super Bowl caliber defense that they wasted. You don't have time, right? You have to be working on your Super Bowl window 2.0, as we've been calling it, with this past draft class, adding really good pieces through next year's draft class and really trying to round this thing out. So it is that interesting dichotomy of, I think Shedeur Sanders deserves more time than 7 games to develop, and he's shown some good progress. So it makes you wonder, what could this thing look like in a year? quarterback development is so tricky for this reason because you have to give guys time, but a lot of times that time just isn't there or teams get impatient and it makes it all the more difficult. But I think this year is a prime example of, hey, in a year where anything can happen, you got to take advantage because you don't know when someone else's window is going to get really wide, when yours is going to suddenly shrink or close. And it's unfortunate when you had one side of the ball really good, the other side of the ball was such a mess. But that is the struggle with going into next year and figuring out how to use those 2 picks, and do you use one of them on a quarterback? Do you need to? Do you think Shedeur is your guy? How much time can you give him? It's all unknowable, and that makes it that much harder.
Yeah, and I think too, because of the way this team is put together and because of the decisions the Browns made, coming out of this Deshaun Watson era, although that's weird to say because Deshaun Watson is still on the team and he's practicing, and who knows, he might be activated in the next week or so. But coming out of this Deshaun Watson era, they did make the decision that they were going to kind of straddle this line between resetting at least a a chunk of the roster, but you're going to pay Myles Garrett a bunch of money. You're still going to be paying Denzel Ward a bunch of money. You've still got veterans like Jerry Judy, David Njoku was brought, was kept around, all of that stuff. Um, and I almost think had they just sort of gone the normal rebuild route, because the way I even still look at it is this offseason, you're going to throw a whole bunch of more young players onto this roster. If one of them's a quarterback, maybe one of them's a quarterback, but you're still going to throw a whole bunch of more young players on this roster. And you're still going to be counting on a bunch of guys from this year who are still going to be like Quinshon Judkins is still going to be a young player who's learning on the job next year to some degree. So, I think next year is an interesting year. I think next year is still very much a transition year for this football team. And normally you could say, all right, like if there's not a quarterback you love, maybe you do let Shedeur Sanders have a little more time. But Mary Kay, there is still and a lot of people would argue this is the right way to do it. Like there should always be a sense of urgency to win right now. And I understand that argument. And with this football team, I still think there is, assuming all these guys are still here making these decisions, that sense of urgency that, they want to get back to it as quickly as possible. They don't want another gap year. So I don't know. I think that makes it even more complicated with Shedeur because you can't have him be your starter in week 1 next year unless you believe that he can go out there and immediately start winning you football games.
Well, that's right, because you've got guys on this football team that are starting to head into the back nine of their career, right? I mean, that Super Bowl window one that, that I've always been talking about is closing. That is closing. We're on the tail end of that one. And that one, of course, includes Myles Garrett, Deshaun Watson, Joel Bitonio, Denzel Ward, David Njoku. Those were the key players in that early Super Bowl window of this regime. And next year, and again, I think, Dan, you and we're not too far apart on how we feel about next year, but we are a little bit divided on how we feel about next year. And that is, I think that if they add all of the players that we know they're going to add, and if they get a quarterback, then I absolutely, based largely on the strength of their defense, think that they can be right in the thick of it in December next year. I think they can be contending for the playoffs next year, but I qualify that, 100% qualify that, and say that that is only if they have the quarterback. And if you've got guys like Myles and Denzel and these guys still here, and maybe even Joel Bitonio still here, and some of these guys, you can't really be trotting a quarterback out there unless you think he's going to win games for you week 1. Nobody can go through another losing season. Nobody wants that. No players want that. No fans want that. Next year has to be about winning. It has to be. It has to be for everybody involved. So they have to figure out their quarterback situation. Now, if they draft a rookie, it doesn't mean that you have to start him right away. You can sit a rookie for an entire year if you want to. So, that's one option. They can decide that Shedeur is their guy, and maybe they throw Deshaun out there for a few games until maybe they think Shedeur is ready. But however they approach it or go about it, they have to find a winning quarterback, and it shouldn't be that hard. Other teams are able to do it. There's got to be a way to find winning quarterback play at the beginning of next season. It has to happen.
Yeah, and I think too, I mean, to your point, like we talked about a little on the AMK pod, and this is just a whole, like we'll probably be doing a lot of this in January. Um, I'll also acknowledge, like, a couple years ago, people thought the Commanders were going to stink, and they went to the NFC Championship game. This year, a lot of people thought the Bears might stink, and they went to, with an upward trend because they brought in Ben Johnson and they were handing things over to him, and they're probably going to the playoffs this year. So there are always teams that you look at and you say, yeah, I think that's maybe a 5, 6, 7 win team. And then the next thing you know, they've won 10, 11 games. So that's just the way this league works. But it's just an interesting it's hard for me to imagine a world where they're going to just look at Shedeur Sanders and say, "That is our guy next season. We're gonna win football games with him. Let's go." Now, I could see a world where they say, "We liked what we saw. Let's let him compete and see what happens." But I don't know if it gets to that other extreme, Ashley. That I think a lot of people. There are certainly a lot of people out there who think that's what they should do. Like, Shedeur, it's your show. Let's go. You're going to win us football games in 2026.
Yeah, I just don't know if there's enough time. Like we've talked about that before, right? Like he's limited to these 7 games, and it is what it is, and it is a very small sample size. It's a big gamble to make on a small sample size when you have the kind of resources this team hasn't had in years. Now, again, that's because of their own ill-advised trade and giving up 3 first-round picks for Deshaun Watson and that not working. Like, if that had worked, we're not talking about any of this, obviously. But that's, I think, where it gets interesting in how are you going to manage that again, because they so poorly managed a 4-way quarterback competition and it just didn't work. And it's like, who's at fault for that? That's what I keep thinking about as we kind of delve into the weeds of like, what's the future for Kevin Stefanski? What's the future for this front office? Like, how was this so mismanaged? And now it's kind of led to these like chemistry issues in week 16, right? So that part of it is interesting. Like the competition part of it, I think it makes sense to want to see him compete for that job, just given the small sample size. But how are you going to manage it this time is my big question going into 2026.
And the other part of this too, Mary Kay, is like, what exactly, first of all, what is this quarterback class going to look like? And where are the Browns going to be in all of this? I mean, I'm looking at Tankathon right now. They're fourth. They're behind the Giants, the Raiders, and the Titans. And of those 3 teams, I would think the only one that would be looking for a quarterback would be Las Vegas. Um, the Raiders play the Giants here in a few weeks. I just looked that up. So I'm curious to see how the Raiders approach that game. Well, could the Giants play spoiler to the Raiders, maybe getting the inside track on Fernando Mendoza? And could that end up gifting him to the Cleveland Browns? I don't know. But once you get past Mendoza, and we don't even know what the Browns think of him yet, there are a lot of question marks, and we don't know if Dante Moore is going to come out. We don't know what they're going to think of Ty Simpson. So the other element of this is, how aggressive do they want to be if they have to go up and get a guy? Like, would they give up a bunch of picks to do it, or do they just want to let the board fall a certain way and they take him? I mean, there's just still so many factors that could play out where they look at this. If Shedeur Sanders holds up his end of the bargain over these last 3 games, where they might look at it and say, our best path forward is Shedeur Sanders and whatever veteran becomes available in the offseason.
Absolutely. That is on the table right now. And I think it's up to him to reinforce the notion that he can be that guy. But he's going to have to show some more things, and he's going to have to show that he can really take that next step up and be ready to go at the beginning of the season, or they're going to have contingency plans. The other factor in all of this, of course, is the fact that we do not know who the coach is going to be right now. We don't know who's going to be coaching the quarterback that we don't know is going to be starting for this football team. So there are a lot of unknowns. And if you decide to make a change at the head coach position here, which I'm on record as saying, I think Kevin deserves a chance to coach this football team when he has the right quarterback in place that he wants. I don't think he's had that yet. So let's see what he can do when he has that opportunity. I don't know if he's going to get that chance, but let's say that they decide they want a new face and a new voice in that chair. Well, a new coach, unless they promote Tommy Rees to head coach, which That seems a bit premature for him in that role at this point, I would think. But sometimes people take a chance on a guy like that. But unless you do something like that, you have to wait and see what your new head coach wants to do at the quarterback situation. You have to see what kind of offense he wants to run, what kind of quarterback he likes, and you have to give him a whole lot of say in that. You have to do that. You can't saddle your new head coach, if there's going to be one, with a quarterback that he might not want. So the quarterback room has largely got to be up to the head coach, if that's Kevin or if that's someone else. And if it's Kevin, Kevin's going to have to really be honest and unflinching about what he wants out of that quarterback room. You can't just take what they give you, because your name is on every single football game. And you have to go out there and you have to win with this quarterback. And it's always the coach quarterback combo. That's what makes the dynamite. That's what makes the magic happen. The quarterback and coach combo most of the time. So I don't think we're going to have any clarity on this whatsoever until we wake up on, what's the date of the last game? I don't even know.
I think it's January 4th. I looked it up the other day because I didn't know either. I'm
Okay.
going to look it up right now again. I think the last game's January 4th.
So
January 4th.
Yeah, so we're not going to know until that maybe Sunday night or that Monday morning where this thing might be going. If it's Kevin, I think that brings one set of circumstances. If it's not Kevin, then we have to figure out who the new head coach is going to be and what kind of offensive system he wants to run. We just don't know the answers to any of these questions yet. I'm on record as saying I think Andrew's coming back. I think Andrew's coming back based on the draft that he just had. I mean, I kind of think it would be hard to be holding this number 1 pick next year that you got out of a trade and be congratulating your NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year and touting your amazing rookie class and be like, see ya, we're done with you. I'm not seeing that. I know a lot of people are seeing that and feeling that, but I am not in that camp. And if that happens, I will be truly surprised about that. I will be surprised about that. As far as Kevin is concerned, I have no idea. I have no idea if he is safe or not. I don't know. And I don't think anybody really knows right now. I think they want to see this 3 games play out with him as well. I think they want to see a clean operation. I think they want to see the team playing hard. I think they want to see maybe fewer pre-snap penalties and things like that. And so I just can't honestly say if anybody knows yet where things are going at head coach or quarterback.
Well, okay, so let's also say that Andrew is back, right? Like, I think we all kind of are leaning that way, that if there are moves made, Kevin is more likely to be gone. There probably is a world where they just blow the whole thing up, but let's say in this scenario that it's just Kevin. What gets interesting there is then I would assume Andrew would be the one making the head coach hire. I would, if you're going to keep Andrew, I would hope that would be the structure they go to, that like, now you got to let Andrew pick his guy if you're going to keep him. Oh, go ahead, Mary Kay.
I would say it would be organizational. I don't think that he would make that decision in a vacuum. I think they would sit down. I think it would be Jimmy, D, JW, Andrew. I think it would be by committee. I really do.
Okay. And I think that would be a mistake if you're going to keep Andrew, because I think Andrew, if you're going to put that faith in him, then he should be the one that makes that decision. And because he's going to be the guy that's picking a coach to fit his roster. And what makes that interesting is, okay, what does Andrew think about Shedeur Sanders long term? What does Andrew think about Deshaun Watson next year? What does Andrew think about Fernando Mendoza, right? Like, now he could be out there hiring a coach who kind of fits the vision that he has for whatever quarterback he thinks should be the quarterback of this football team next year. So I think that's a whole other unknown element of this. Like, if they fire everybody, maybe you're hiring a coach who comes in and says, I hate this quarterback room and I want this guy and this is the direction we're going. But if you only fire Kevin, then organizationally they might decide that they want to back a quarterback who's already here and find a coach who agrees with them on that. That's what makes it so complicated, Ashley, when you just don't know who's even going to be making all of these decisions?
Yeah, that adds this other layer to it. Like, it was complicated enough, right? With just wondering what exactly is this draft class going to look like. That is like one layer to all of this. And what the people making the decisions are going to be, who they're going to be, is another layer to all of this. And it just creates so much unknown. It makes it even harder to predict the future. Obviously, it's impossible to predict the future in the NFL anyway. But I think that when those decisions are made, what you're saying, Dan, is like the part of it for me. We're going to glean more as these decisions are made and figure out, okay, what does Andrew Berry think of this and think of certain things long term if it comes to that. And I'm kind of fascinated to see how it plays out. But I think that the predicting the future part of it, and I mean, in a vacuum, like predicting what it means for the quarterback in Shedeur Sanders becomes that much more complicated and that much more uncertain.
And I also think, like, to kind of what you were saying, Mary Kay, and again, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying I disagree with that approach if that's what they do. Because I was talking to somebody today out of practice. Like, I do think one of the mistakes you can make in this process is to hire someone as your head coach and basically say, you're our head coach, but this is going to be your quarterback and this is going to be your defensive coordinator. And we love Tommy Reese, so we want to keep him around. Like, you're going to be our head coach, but we're going to make all these decisions underneath you. I think you've got to give that guy autonomy to make the decisions he wants with his quarterback, with his staff, with all of that. And if they do this committee thing, and of course Andrew is still in the mix, I just wonder if they're going to lose some of that. And then you're kind of just hiring, I don't want to say a puppet, but you're hiring someone that you from the jump is not necessarily empowered.
But let me ask you this, Dan. Have you ever seen this organization
No.
do it
I
any other way?
I don't even
Have
need to let you finish the question. No.
they, right? I mean, have they ever done it any other way except for putting their heads together and coming up with these decisions and these choices by committee? Now, the only major difference now is that their chief strategy officer,
Right.
Paul DePodesta, is no longer here. So it remains to be seen. Will they, if they do decide to make a switch, do they bring in Corn Ferry or a search firm and try to go about it that way? But I just don't see them saying to Andrew, "Go do your thing." That's not how they operate here. Not even when it comes to the decision to trade for Deshaun Watson. That wasn't just Andrew Berry's decision. It was an organizational decision. And I think that's exactly how they're going to operate when it comes time to figuring out what they want to do at their head coach position. So I just think that that's how these guys have shown us that they operate. And I don't see it going any other way.
Well, and the one time that it feels like they did sort of empower their GM to hire a guy, they ended up with Freddie Kitchens as their head coach. So maybe they're still sort of feeling a little burnt by that. But again, I don't know. Well, I know that's exciting podcasting to sit here and say I don't know, but we really truly don't know exactly what this is going to look like. And to Mary Kay's point, Ashley, it's like she's right. This has always been an organization that does things together. And I don't know if I know Paul DePodesta took a lot of heat when he left. I do think there were times when he was sort of a buffer or maybe a voice of reason. That doesn't mean that he's without blame. And that doesn't mean that he didn't do some things that obviously didn't work. But they don't have that buffer anymore. Like it's Jimmy, it's D, it's JW, and then there's Andrew. Like, so that makes this even more interesting.
Yeah, and I think too, like, the interesting thing with that position, because it's like, I'm sure you guys get asked this all the time, like, who's gonna replace Paul DePodesta? And like, my answer to that is like, well, like, no one knows that, and like, there doesn't even have to be a replacement, right? Like, and I think everyone wants to jump to, oh, like, would Andrew take that job and someone there'd be a new GM? Like, we don't know any of that, but like, my caution is there doesn't have to be a Paul DePodesta replacement. It can kind of be just what you're saying, Dan, and they'll go from there. So it is an interesting part of it. And again, we talked about that departure, and Paul DePodesta left on his own. He got that job with the Rockies. He took it, right? But it's one of those moves that you're like, oh, in a year, will we look back on it and be like, oh, that was the start of something? Or will it just mean really nothing in the grand scheme of the day today? We don't know, but I've joked. I mean, for Browns fans, Paul DePodesta has been like the boogeyman, the scapegoat. Like they've been able to make him whatever they wanted or needed when things weren't going wrong because he never got out in front of anything. And that was kind of the philosophy, right? That's like part of Moneyball. So, hey, man, I don't know. That's fun podcasting for us to just say, I don't know, as you said, Dan.
Well, I do know that I had the privilege of running into a random Paul DePodesta sighting at the Fairfield Inn in Needham, Massachusetts, like 2 weeks before he left. So who knew that maybe I had the inside scoop on something? I don't should have asked him how he was doing, but we'll tell that story on the pod someday. We got to recap our year of travel here on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast at the end of the season. Okay, I think we'll wrap things up there here on a Wednesday. The Browns do play the Bills this week. We will have a preview pod coming up on Thursday, the usual stuff, storylines, Lance's scouting report, and our picks. So just get subscribed on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Find our YouTube channel, Cleveland Browns, on cleveland.com. And of course, if you're not a Football Insider subscriber, head to cleveland.com/Browns, click the blue banner at the top of the page, and get involved. For Mary Kay and Ashley, I'm Dan. Thanks for listening, everybody.